Hi, Steven. Hello, Alex. Big fans of y'all's channels, and I'm glad y'all did that. Sorry, I keep saying y'all. I'm from Texas, so excuse me for that. But I like the two videos you guys just did, and I really like your style in that you're so conversational, and I feel like I want to sit down at the table and give you my 2 cents. Not that it's you guys have asked for it in any way, but I want to participate in the conversation, and I've tried to do that a little bit by supporting Alex on Patreon. But anyway, so I'm not getting to the point here. I should probably get to the point quickly, or else nobody will ever watch my video. Which is, I liked y'all's video on free will, and I agree with your premises, or I guess those would be Sam Harris's premises. Um, but I think there is a way to preserve something that looks a lot like free will in spite of those premises. And so I feel like now I'm going to try and sum up. Your premises were basically that if it's determinism, then no free will, because everything is determined. Every moment is determined exactly by previous moments, and that goes all the way back to the very beginning, the initial way that the universe was. And so all information was basically contained initially, and it's just being sort of processed, sort of like a fractal or something like that. And so complexity emerges, but all information was basically there at the beginning, and so there is no wiggle room for any sort of a free will. It's just an illusion. Or the quantum mechanics side, probabilistic nature of the universe, which means that even though there is a probability factor to the universe, if my choices are being dictated by random chance, that doesn't really mean that I'm free either. It just means that some of my choices are random. And so there's really no room for free will there either. And so it seems like a lot of people are defining free will as the ability to have done otherwise. I think Sam Harris says that. I think I've heard him say that. Anyway, there are some ways, I think, that we can, with science, preserve something that looks a lot like free will. And so here are my highly speculative premises. Now, I say these are highly speculative because I don't necessarily believe these premises, but I do think that they are plausible and not contradictory. So these are possible, plausible, scientific premises that are not necessarily true. I hope that I'm saying that right. Anyway, here are my premises. An infinite multiverse exists, or our own universe is infinite and unbounded. 2, that's number 1. I'll left myself some gray area here. Try and put those up. 2, a life arises with a certain regularity, or with a certain probability through natural processes given the right conditions. So basically what I'm saying here is that there's no magic. There's no outside influence. A life spontaneously arises given the right conditions, with a given probability. And 3, that naturalism is true. So basically what I'm saying is there's no outside metaphysical influence. There's no metaphysical realm. These are my premises. I'm not saying that I believe these things. These are just the premises to my argument. And so here are my conclusions. So a lot of this derives from a premise 1, infinite multiverse exists, or our own universe is infinite and unbounded. So you can conclude that there are an infinite number of Earths, basically. So if you've got an infinite amount of space, and you've got an infinite amount of matter, you're going to end up with an infinite number of galaxies. And the funny thing about infinities is that given enough of whatever it is, time and matter, you'll end up basically with copies of things. And so there'll be an infinite number of Earths. There'll also be an infinite number of almost Earths, and there'll be an infinite number of situations where there is no Earth. And but given infinity, you'll have an infinite number of Earths. You'll also have an infinite number of basically you. And so there are an infinite number of Earths. All possible Earths exist, and there will be an infinite number of you, and all possible you also exist. So that's my number one conclusion there. So if you don't like the way that sounds, maybe read Brian Greene's Multiverse book, which is where the seed of that idea was sort of sown for me. And I think that that's just something that arises naturally from infinity, in the idea of multiverse, or the infinite and unbounded, or inflationary multiverse, or things like that. You end up with these weird situations where there are copies of you and me, and the earth and various things like that. Conclusion 2, because naturalism is true, all of you that are identical are in fact you. There is no metaphysical self or individual to distinguish between two identical yous. So basically what I'm saying here is that if there is another you, a copy of you out there that is identical to you in every single way, it is you. Because there's no extra element of you-ness present. There's no magical, mystical, metaphysical you. It's just a collection of atoms in a certain configuration in a certain place. And so these other copies of you are actually you. 3, this is conclusions again. There are yous that choose differently in all situations where a different choice is possible. And so basically, there is a you that was exactly like you in every respect, up until the point that you weren't anymore. And at that point where things began to deviate, they became different. And so these points of deviation aren't necessarily choices. They could be anything. They could be the choices of your next door neighbor, or the person in charge of the country on the other side of the planet, or whatever it is that makes their reality deviate from yours. But in some of these situations, those deviations would be choices that you've made that are different. And so at that point, are they still you or are they not you? And so that's a good question, I guess. And so, conclusion 4, even though you on this earth could not have chosen to do differently, another you on another earth did. So basically what I'm saying here is, even though we have no access to these other yous and these other earths, or the multiverse, where these, or the unreachable beyond the cosmic horizon areas where these other copies of you may exist, we have no access to these. So it becomes fairly unscientific at this point. But I guess if you could prove that there is such a thing as an infinite multiverse, even without discovering these other yous, you could say something that appears a lot like free will exists. And so the reason it looks a lot like free will is that there's a person that is indistinguishable from you because he is you in every respect, who at every point that he could chose differently, and at that point maybe they become not you, they become a different you. And so all I'm saying, I guess, is that looks a lot like free will to me. I couldn't have done differently, but me, someone indistinguishable from me who believes he's me and is me, did do differently on a different earth. And so maybe that is pedantic, or I don't know what the right word is for that, but that seems a lot like free will to me. And so the other way that free will could arise is easier than that, which is if the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is true, then when you have got a probability wave, a probability field that tells you the likelihood of finding a particle in any given location when you look for it. And so if you use the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, basically what you're saying is not that there's a probability of finding a particle in a specific place. The probability then is the probability that you are finding yourself in one of the many worlds where that particle happens to be. And so the probability becomes the probability of you being the measurer in a place where that particle is. And so I'm not explaining this very well, but basically what it is all outcomes of that experiment of looking for a particle, all possible outcomes are actual outcomes, And the thing you're measuring as probability is basically not where the particle will end up, but which reality you just happen to be measuring in. And so if that's the case, then at any point that you could have done otherwise, you actually did do otherwise. And if you did do otherwise, that looks a lot like free will as well. So maybe I didn't have a choice in that necessarily. I'm not sure if free will exactly comes into it, but it looks a lot like free will to me, because saying I could have done otherwise, it's even more powerful to say I did do otherwise. And in fact, in every situation that I could have done otherwise, I did do otherwise. And so that seems a lot like free will. And so maybe it's not exactly free will, but I just wanted to throw that in there, that something like free will isn't necessarily completely obliterated by Sam Harris's sort of premises. Anyway, if you actually watch this, thank you, and I'm a big fan, and I guess that's it. All right, bye.